Yeah, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the December ADC special business meeting for the purpose of introducing and voting in our long list of pending ADC members. So I'd like to call this meeting to order. I wanted to thank you all for participating in this meeting tonight. You may know that back on October 25th, the ADC held an emergency meeting in the parking lot of the Mini Howard School to pass emergency bylaws to allow for electronic business. And I wanted to especially thank our parliamentarian, David Lord, our public safety officer, Sean Casey, Vice Chair of Technology, Ricardo Alfaro, for all your work to make that meeting possible, which allowed for this electronic business to be possible. We are still, due to COVID and an emergency situation, this is our first attempt at trying to do electronic business. So I hope you'll bear with us through the technological issues tonight. You may know that the ADC membership process is multi-step and multi-meeting typically, but our effort is to try to streamline that tonight. We will be going through a number of different procedures, so I hope you'll pay close attention to the instructions that you receive, whether that's from me or our parliamentarian, David. So with that, I actually just wanted to jump in to the membership introduction process, which is led by our membership experience officer, Sandy Marks. It's her son's birthday tonight, so I hope we don't belabor the meeting and be here more than we need to. I also learned that it's Ricardo's son's birthday tonight, so for the same reason, I hope we're able to.
Happy birthday to the boys.
Yeah, so I hope we're able to keep it as efficient as possible.
Yes, Sandy? Hurry up because of our kids. Okay, first of all, if everybody could mute themselves, that would be perfect. So everybody hit mute if you can. Excellent. That already sounds better. All right. So as you know, in general, what we do at ADC meetings is at your first meeting after becoming a member or after applying, we invite you up onto the stage at Mini Howard in front of all of your peers, and we welcome you and you say your name. We get to hear you say it out loud. You tell us a little bit about yourself. And then at your next meeting, we vote you in. And obviously, as Clarence said, we're not able to do that now. So we're going to do the introduction process now. I know that a couple of you have already been introduced, but we're just going to do it again. It'll just take a second. And then as Clarence mentioned, we will adjourn and convene again. I'm sure David will go into that and we will vote you in. But I did want to say expressly that your names are important. The way they're pronounced, what they mean to you, and in ordinary times, like I said, you'd be introducing yourselves and we'd hear your beautiful name spoken in your own voice, but COVID. So while it has been wonderful emailing back and forth with so many of our new members, it's not great for pronunciation. My oldest kiddo, whose birthday it is today, once read an entire series of books about someone he called Penelope, because he never heard the name Penelope spoken out loud. So I will be less accurate than you would be, but I'm going to do my best for all of you Penelopes out there. When I've finished reading all of the names, if I missed you somehow, please say so, because we definitely want to count you. I'm going to read our list of new members who are present here in the order of precinct. Our vice chairs of precinct operations are here: Sissy Walker in the west and Karen Witt in the east. I saw Sissy wave. I hope Karen's waving. As we say your name, give us a wave, and we'll say hello to you. And I really look forward to meeting you in person So we can do this a little bit more in a more friendly way. But for formality purposes, here we go. Are you ready? You all look so bored. Okay, you're ready. Let's do it. Okay. First, from Precinct 101, Ladre Senior Building, we have Maylene Klein, Janet McAdoo, and Patricia McCall. From Precinct 102 City Hall, we're introducing Marie Devine, who hopefully was able to get in, Kelly Johnson, Adam Pribila, Chris Roy, and Harrison Wadsworth. Hello, welcome. From Precinct 103, Lyles Crouch, we have Catherine Alston, Carl Bach, the Jen Runkle, Brittany Wilson. From Precinct 104, Durant Precinct, we have Carrie Kreiser, Kreiser Troy, Madison Butler, Alex Butler, and Susie Chapman. From Lee Center, we have Scott Frey and Gabrielle Kaufman. From Precinct 106, Cora Kelly, we've got Diana Mertz. And from my own precinct, 107, Mount Vernon Rec Center, we have Tiffany Del Rio, Christina Hildebittel, Dennis Wagner, and Robin Warner. From Precinct 108, George Washington Middle School, we have Gordon Johnston, Peggy Kleistuber, and Thomas Ortiz. From 109, the Fire Department Headquarters Precinct, we have Tony Robinson. From 110, Precinct 110, Charles Houston Rec Center, we have Charlie Paul. And from 112, Alex Renew, we have Shannon Curtis. From Precinct 201, Maury School, hi Shannon. From Precinct 201, Maury School, we have Catherine Klinger and James Conrad and George Hastings. From Precinct 202, George Mason School, we have Michael O'Neill. From Charles Barrett Center, Precinct 203, we have Andrew Batali. From Precinct 206, Chinkabin Rec, we have Stephanie Oberoma. From Precinct 207, Temple Bethel Synagogue, we have Jeffrey Bennett, Justine Kingham, and transplant to 207, Kirk McPike. From Precinct 208, Nova Art Center, we have Mary Horner, Megan Mahoney, Carrie Wood, and Carly Wright. From Precinct 210, the Hermitage, we have John Meyer. And 303, Beatley, we have Diana Phillips. From, and Beatley, obviously, we have Dick Griffin. From Precinct 304, Sam Tucker School, we've got Brian Calvary and Crystal Kramer, we don't know, we'll find out, and Darman Masadou. From John Adams School, Precinct 305, we have James Flores and we have Meg Flores. From Precinct 306, William Ramsey School, we have Lara Drizzt. And from Precinct 308, Cameron Station, we have Ann Harbor and Christina Nazer. Did I miss anybody? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Yeah, hi, Sandy. My name is Adrian Mendelson, and
Okay.
I would be in the City Hall precinct.
Okay,
Now,
so
for this, I don't know if you got the list from requests all along. I know I registered quite late for this meeting.
so that might be it. So you're
Okay.
here. That's what matters. I've got you marked as present.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you very much.
Is there anybody else?
Yes,
Oh.
Kate Madrick is with
Kate-
me.
Oh, you know what? That happens every time, doesn't it?
Yeah, but hey, we're consistent at least.
Yes.
Who-
Okay.
Sorry,
Who
who was that that's there after all?
Kate Madrick. is signed in with Tom Ortiz.
Oh, okay.
And then Megan Mahoney, were you about to say something?
Yeah, my fiance Brandon Jokes is also on. He is just also in grad class at the same time, so he wasn't able to speak up.
I've emailed with him. What was his last name?
It's Jokes, Gilkes.
Okay, well, good, because I was going to say Gilkis. So
Oh, all the time.
here we go. Yes, I spoke with him. Okay. Anybody else?
I want to ask because I don't see them, Madison and Alex Butler, are you here somewhere? I've been looking through the list to check off. You're in Durant Center 104. Are you all actually here? If you're here, can you unmute yourself and say yes? Alex and Madison Butler from Durant Center, if maybe you're on the phone.
I see that now. Why don't we go through it? You want me to go through and ask for him? Okay. Kreiser Troy, are you here?
Yes,
He's
I
here.
see him.
Only Troy. You know what, Troy? For some reason, your name is flipped. Sorry. Well, your name is not Kreiser. Your name is Troy. We'll get that. All right. And then how about, okay, the Madison Butler and Alex Butler we haven't heard from. What about Tiffany Del Rio?
Yeah, she's the other one that I don't see anywhere.
Tony Robinson?
Sorry to interrupt. Are we talking about folks who are sorry. So for the people who are being voted in tonight,
Yes.
they should, is this all, are these all the names we're talking about?
Yes,
Yeah,
because
Yes,
she read the list
I
of
wasn't
names.
called. I
You
wasn't
weren't called.
Sorry.
Okay.
you
Derek
Derek?
Robinson.
What precinct are you in? You know,
Oh God.
do you have them on the list? Amy?
You know what? Yeah, we don't even have your precinct on here, but Derek, you're
Okay.
here. You are bolded, you are highlighted in blue because that's the
Okay.
high process I'm using. All right, Derek Robinson, you are here. All right, what about you guys?
Are you related to Tony Robinson?
No, never met Tony.
That's a different. Okay, there's
Sounds
a Tony.
like a nice guy though.
There's another Okay, what
Another
about
Robinson.
is Charlie Paul here?
He's the other one I was missing. Yep, Charlie Paul and Tony Robinson. If you're here, speak up so we can count you.
These are all people who registered. Okay,
Right.
what about Justine Kingham? Or Carly Wright? Or John Meyer? Wait, not John Meyer. Or Crystal Kramer? Or and that's it. Okay, so we have some people who aren't here. So we'll just clean up this. Oh,
And I made a
Stuart-
note. I made a note, Sandy. I've got the ones on the east side that aren't named.
Okay, and Stuart says he didn't hear his name called. Stuart, I didn't have you listed as registered, but you're here. So there you go.
What's his last name?
Vebsky. So I'm highlighting him on my list
Bensky.
from Charles Houston Rec Center.
Got it. Welcome.
Okay, I think we're complete. And Derek, we'll figure out your precinct.
Cool.
If you want to actually, if you want to message me your address, I'll figure it out and shoot it back to you.
Cool.
Okay, I think Clarence, David, for the purposes of voting, I think we have a list
Okay,
of everybody.
hold on. Crystal Kramer is trying to get in. She's having trouble getting in.
Okay. I will note that. I'm going to highlight her as present.
Okay.
And then is there anybody else at this point whose name hasn't been called that is here? Okay.
All right, parliamentarian.
So I think, Clarence, everybody's been introduced. So I don't know if you want to just adjourn this and then restart it, if that was your intention.
Yeah, so nobody get off the line. Like this was actually David's concept, a 2-in-1, so we could get the membership meeting done tonight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjourn this meeting and then call another meeting for the purpose of the vote. All right, this meeting is adjourned. I'm calling December 7th, a special business meeting for the purpose of voting in our new ADC members. We also have one item of business to discuss relating to the electoral board, a recommendation that we have to provide to the circuit court by December 15th. So Sandy, back to you. You're on mute.
Whatever. Okay. So now we're back. We're in our second meeting through the magic of Zoom and parliamentarian fun. And we have already introduced all of you. I'm going to skip reading all of your names again, but we're so happy to have you back in meeting number 2. We're so glad you came again. And you're all so wonderful. And of course, you should be members of the Alexandria Democratic Committee, obviously. So we are going to take a vote on admitting you into full membership. And so should I do that, David?
So I would move that we accept as members to the ADC all those individuals presented, whose names were presented at the special session or the special meeting earlier this.
All right.
Seconded.
Any other discussion? All in favor? What are we going to
Second.
do, Ricardo? Are we going to
We're gonna have
raise
people
our hands, or what are we going to do?
Raise our
Yeah. I recommend raising of the hand, and then as long as you don't see anybody raising their hand when you call the nays, we don't need to do a divided vote. Does that make sense?
Where's the hand? Oh, hand.
This hand.
Yeah,
Tell
just-
people how to raise their hand.
Are we just waving or are we raising a hand on the
Yeah,
system?
when Clarence says all in favor, say aye, or raise your hand, just raise
Yes, just raise your hand.
New members, welcome to this family. Like this
Aye.
is like family, right? Okay.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye and raise your
Aye.
hand.
Aye.
Raise your hand.
Okay.
Yeah,
New members, you can't vote on yourself.
and the nays. Are there any nays?
Everybody put your hands down now. Okay. And if you're saying nay, please raise your hand now. No, I see no raised hands.
Okay, well then, I think we can just
Welcome.
everyone is in. All right, congratulations.
Bylaws are the greatest invention.
Yeah, we're very sorry it took this many months to get to this point, but I'm really glad to have you and to officially welcome you to the ADC.
Darwin says it's been a 2-year process for him. So
2 years.
Mm.
Well, better late than never. And we are going into a very busy year, and actually at the 7:30 live stream, we're going to speak more about what that looks like. But I wanted to actually discuss an item of business that we have to do as a committee. As I mentioned, there's an electoral board appointment that is up this December. The circuit court has requested the party recommendations as a Democratic seat, and one of 2 that Democrats currently have, as we have currently a Democratic governor. So in accordance to processes that we have completed in a number of different years, we had an application process open before the Thanksgiving weekend, the Thanksgiving holiday and weekend. And after the holiday weekend, we received the applications, and our executive committee had discussion and made a recommendation. What I'll say is that the current seat is held by the electoral board secretary. His name is Jack Powers, who I believe is also on the call right now tonight. The last year has been incredibly unprecedented. Nobody predicted what COVID would do at the beginning of the year. It resulted in a lot of changes to our electoral process. As you know, we had a majority, actually supermajority of our voters in the city vote absentee. It was a very complicated year. The electoral board had to help navigate through that. So because of that situation, we thought as a board that continuity would be really important going into this next election year in 2021, where COVID unfortunately still with us, and having experienced leadership there would be helpful. With that said, we did receive a second application, a gentleman named Tom Ortiz, who was just voted in tonight to our membership. I really had a great discussion with Tom earlier this week. He had also done a lot of electoral board, well, not electoral board, electoral work, volunteering with the registrar's office, helping to stuff the absentee ballots. And he told me that he was also a very dedicated grassroots volunteer, having helped work on phone banks. And I told Tom that while the executive committee couldn't recommend him this time around, that we look forward to his participation, and hopefully we get him in the mix in the future. So with that, because of the deadline we have with the circuit court, I wanted to see, as a first item of the electronic business that we have, that we can codify the executive committee's recommendation to recommend Jack to continue to serve on the electoral board. And also that we would, because we have to submit 3 names to the circuit court, that will include Tom as one of the other names that we submit, and we'll figure out who the third person will be. So that is the business that I wanted to bring forward, and I welcome any questions or discussion.
And Clarence, just so we have a motion on the table, I'll move to accept, or that we forward those recommendations as recommended by the executive board.
Okay. Thank you. Do we need a second on that, or
We do need a second.
somebody?
Second.
Any other discussion on that?
Well, I had a question. Like, if I'm clear, like, are you talking about like ADC applications that we fill in like every year or something, or what are we talking about?
The application that needed to be completed was provided through the State Board of Election. The form itself is an eligibility form. There's a number of different criteria that you need to meet to serve as an electoral board member. There are some things that could potentially disqualify you as well, like serving as a party chair. Like I would not be someone who could serve.
So it has nothing to do with ADC membership in general?
No, we are considering a recommendation for the electoral board, which needs to be submitted to the circuit court by December 15th.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah, thanks. If there isn't any other discussion, I guess we can just take a vote on that. Do you all want to take show of hands again, or how?
Yeah, that's the easiest way to continue to do it, is a show of hands. Just that, as long as there's no dissent, then you don't need to do a divided or recorded vote.
Great. But you already did the motion, right?
Correct. It's
And
already
a second. Okay, so then I just call all in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Yes, the new members are allowed to vote for this because you're all new membership.
Yeah, now you can vote.
Yes,
Aye.
great. And nays?
Can everybody put their hands down first, and then we'll do? Yep. Okay. Now it's okay to call for nays.
Nays?
And I'm paging through. Ricardo, I don't see any raised hands for nays.
All right, then our motion is adopted, and we are going to recommend Jack as our committee recommendation for the electoral board, the circuit court, and Tom Ortiz will be also listed as one of the three names, and we will pick a third person that, you know, has the eligible criteria to do the third one. So, great. So I think that actually concludes the business that we wanted to cover tonight. You may know that we also have a live stream starting at 7:30 p.m. where we're going to provide more committee updates. We're going to hear from our Vice Mayor Elizabeth Bennett-Parker to provide, you know, update from the city, as well as two of our 2021 Democratic candidates. One for governor, Jennifer Carroll Foy, one for lieutenant governor, Delegate Sam Rasoul. Over the next few months in the primary season, I hope that we can hear from all of the statewide candidates who are running for these offices. It's an incredibly critical year, and it's going to be you know, very important that you know, we learn about the candidates and, you know, make the right choice so we can you know, be successful next November. Anyone have any other questions before we adjourn this business meeting? And I hope you'll join us again at the 7:30 session.
Is it appropriate at this point to thank all of you who put this together? I know it wasn't always easy.
Always appropriate.
It's our first try.
I have a question as far as getting the information about the live stream. Where will that information, where can that be found?
To answer the question? Oh, yes, please. So that's the easiest way to see it through embed on our website, but we also use.
I tried to see this meeting on the alexdems.org website, and I couldn't find out a way to get it. I went to the website, and how were you supposed to click onto it?
Huh?
That is really weird. I just couldn't get it or find it. And okay, thank you anyway. Okay.
Great. Well, Adrian, I hope that helps and that you'll be able to join us in a little bit. Any other?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Any other questions or final thoughts?
Well, I'd just like to welcome all the new West members. It's really great to see you. I know some of you worked in the campaign in the fall, and we'll be back. So you'll be hearing from me and from your precinct captains. I know I speak for Karen too, for the East. So
Yes.
yeah, we just have barely enough time to recover from one before we barge into the next. So it'll probably be a lot of virtual also, my guess, at least in the first half of the year.
Well, hopefully they'll release the vaccine soon and that it'll be effective, and who knows.
Yes, we're very much looking forward to working with all of you as volunteers on the East Side too. So welcome, and your precinct captains will absolutely be in touch.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining
everybody.
tonight. We'll see you in a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. You're wonderful.
Good evening, Clarence Tong here. Thank you for joining the ADC's live stream program tonight. I hope you've been able to get some rest since our successful November election, and we're able to celebrate Thanksgiving and hopefully the holidays as well in a safe and socially distanced way. I wanted to start by recognizing that 2020 has been a difficult year for many in our committee and our community between COVID and the associated economic challenges. We have worked hard to try to meet this moment, providing you with information about useful city and community resources available to support the families that are really in need. Our ADC Labor Caucus, led by Sean Casey and Russ Davis, with support from Nova Labor President Ginny Diamond, have met weekly since the COVID pandemic started to assist impacted workers and their families. You may know, though, that the ADC's main mission is a political one, and this past 4 years has been a very challenging time in our history. But because of your individual and our collective efforts, help is on the way. President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris will provide leadership on COVID, economic relief for families, and work to get our country back on track in a number of different policy areas and restore our international standing. Democrats retain the majority in the House and gain seats in the Senate. And on January 5th, 2 special Senate elections in Georgia will determine control of the Senate. And I know many of you have been working hard on these elections. Our collective efforts have made it possible for a more equitable and progressive agenda for all Alexandrians, Virginians, and Americans. I am especially proud of the efforts of the ADC leadership, members, and volunteers over the past year. We worked to deliver the most votes for Democrats in Alexandria history for our Biden-Harris-Warner-Buyer ticket. And our hometown Senator Mark Warner received the most votes in Virginia's history, beating his own record in 2008. Look, there was no playbook for campaigning during a global pandemic. We strive to reach voters where they are, but with fewer tools than we had grown accustomed to, especially in recent years, like mobilizing our volunteers for door-to-door canvassing. We needed to think outside the box, reimagine what campaigning would look like, and adapt to an election where most voters would be voting absentee by mail or drop box or early in person. So starting in July, after no excuse absentee voting took effect, made possible by the Democrats in the General Assembly, the ADC launched a public campaign to make sure voters knew about their voting options. We stressed that voting would be safe, easy, and convenient. And with the assistance of our Vice Chair for Technology, Ricardo Alfaro, we launched a new online resource called alexandriavotes.com. We sent out mailers to the largest universe of Alexandria voters in our history and relentlessly focused on turnout. As our early vote coordinator, Mary Ann Anderson, reflected, every day felt like election day for 45 days straight. So I wanted to thank everyone on our early vote team for covering all those days at every early voting location. And while tedious, being present and visible over that time was invaluable, helping voters to navigate the more complex voting process, and it also helped us recruit new ADC volunteers. I also wanted to thank Donna Kenley and her team in Cameron Station, who wrote over 10,000 postcards to difficult-to-reach voters who reside in locked buildings, which make up more than half of the residents in the city of Alexandria. I'd like to thank Sharon Wilkinson, that led our diversity task force that worked with our communications team to design materials in several languages and put posters up around the city. Daniel Mosier, who coordinated our fall ADC farmers market programs. They distributed signs, buttons, and bumper stickers to hundreds, if not thousands, of Alexandrians who wanted them. And Sissy Walker, who led our phone bank team that made over 5,000 calls to encourage seniors to request their absentee ballots over the summer, and then worked with the Biden team to chase the absentee ballots to make sure that all of our votes came back. And Karen Witt, who organized both our lit drops and coordinated volunteers on election day. And Holly Wallace and Liz Campbell for keeping our office open and in business almost every day over the summer and into the fall. And while there are unfortunately more people to recognize and thank than we'll have time for tonight, I just want to say we couldn't have done this work without you. Thank you for all you do and your generous support. But as you know, here in Virginia, there is no rest for the weary. 2021 is shaping up to be a very busy and consequential election year. The ADC is responsible for overseeing the nomination and vetting process for Democratic candidates running for local offices, as well as working to elect all of our Democrats at the local and state level in 2021. And for those of you who are newer to Alexandria or Virginia, I want to remind you of some of the offices, or actually all the offices that will be up in 2021. At the local level in 2021, there will be elections for mayor, city council, school board, Commonwealth's attorney, and sheriff. I just wanted to note that school board is technically a nonpartisan race. While the ADC does not hold an endorsement process for school board, there are still many candidates who seek our support and ask for Democratic Party resources. So you'll be hearing more about the process for all of these local elections in the coming months. At the state level, all three statewide offices, governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general, as well as the Virginia House of Delegates, will be elected in 2021. And Democrats have already chosen primary as the method of nomination. Starting tonight and in coming months, you'll have a chance to hear directly from Democratic candidates seeking our statewide offices. But this year is not over yet. I wanted to make sure to plug our ADC holiday event and celebration next week. The ADC's Leadership Circle program, which raises funds to cover our office rent and operating expenses, will be holding virtually our annual ADC Leadership Circle event next Tuesday, December 15th from 7 to 8 p.m. Many of you may be growing tired of Zoom events, but this is not a program to miss. In addition to Congresswoman Jennifer Wexton joining as our special guest speaker, we will have a special performance by Hexagon, a political satire group. The event is free for all 2020 contributors of Leadership Circle, and anyone can join with a contribution to Leadership Circle at any level, which we're now crediting towards our 2021 goal, because under Janet Vasick's incredible leadership, we were able to reach our 2020 goal early. So please see the link on the screen, and we'll try to add it in our Facebook live chat in a little bit to sign up. Also, I wanted to share an announcement from our Democrats to Go team. If you're interested in helping John Ossoff or Reverend Raphael Warnock, the Democrats competing in the 2 Georgia Senate runoffs, Dems to Go can help you sign up for their phone banks, which are being held daily. The short of in-person canvassing, phone banking is the most effective way to reach voters and increase turnout. The easiest way to get involved is by going to the Dems to Go website, which is just democratstogo spelled out.org. And you'll find links to these phone banks as well as a donation link. You can also get more information and ask questions by emailing Dorothea and John at dems2go@gmail.com. Finally, I wanted to congratulate our Vice Chair for Technology, Ricardo Alfaro, who is also producing tonight's live stream, on his decisive election to become the Vice Chair of Technology and Communications for the Democratic Party of Virginia. Congrats, Ricardo. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker this evening. It's our Vice Mayor Elizabeth Bennett-Parker, to provide an update from the city. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Clarence. Good evening, Alexandria Democrats. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight, but more importantly, thank you for everything you did to elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. We still have more work to do, but it's great to know that we only have another 43 days of Trump in the White House. Thank you also for all you're going to do to make sure we keep Democratic control in Virginia in next year's election. Thanks to the Democratic majority we worked hard to elect last year, our Commonwealth is a better place. And I look forward to continuing to work with all of you to retain and gain Democratic seats so that we can continue to make Virginia better for all residents. I want to start tonight by speaking about COVID. Unfortunately, our case volume has been increasing this fall, and we are now at the highest number of known cases we've seen. Our 7-day average positivity rate is 8.2%, which is our highest rate in 6 months. And we had 121 new cases reported yesterday. So please do not stop with the mask wearing and the social distancing. It's incredibly important. And I know I'm preaching to the choir in this crowd, given that unfortunately mask wearing has been politicized, and I know that we all believe in science, but I also know that everyone is really tired of COVID and the weather is getting colder. It's harder to be outside. We have a bunch of holidays coming up that we usually celebrate with families and friends. So please remain vigilant, follow the CDC guidance, keep those celebrations virtual, and gather only with those in your household to minimize the spread in our community and keep our essential workers and our healthcare workers safe. We do continue our targeting testing initiative in partnership with Neighborhood Health. So there are free testing events multiple times per week. If you have any symptoms or have been exposed to someone with COVID, please get tested. If you have health insurance and a primary care doctor, please start there. If you don't have a primary care doctor, there's a list and a map on the city's website of providers that are offering testing and accepting, whether clinics or folks accepting new patients. This is not an exhaustive list. I know, for example, I was tested by my primary care doctor and she's not listed there. But if you found out that you've been exposed and you need to get a test more quickly than you can get an appointment, then please definitely visit one of those biweekly sites for testing. Obviously, no vaccine is available yet, but the health department is working on plans for vaccine distribution once it's available. And I know we are all looking forward to that day. As you all know, we got some CARES Act money that we have been allocating for food assistance, rental assistance, and small business assistance. That money from the federal government had to be expended by the end of the year, and we are on track to spend that. Tomorrow night, because we can't be certain that additional money is coming from the federal government, we're voting on an allocation of an additional $1 million to continue food assistance and eviction prevention assistance next year, because obviously those needs are not going to go away at the end of this year. And that money comes from some reimbursements that we've received from FEMA. That being said, Congress is hopefully working on a relief package that includes $160 billion for state and local governments. And so we hope that that passes soon, but of course are awaiting additional details. While we're talking about money, I thought I would provide an update on the city's budget. COVID hit while we were in the middle of our budget season earlier this year. And prior to COVID, we were heading towards an expected surplus of $5 or $10 million for fiscal year 20, which ended in June. However, revised estimates at the beginning of April projected instead a shortfall of $35 million, as well as a shortfall of $56 million for the FY21 budget we were in the process of working on. So the city manager proposed a revised budget that included a hiring freeze, removing merit increases for staff, deferring capital projects in the CIP, spending reductions, and use of reserves. His initial budget had called for a 2-cent increase in the real estate tax to fund capital projects for the 10-year CIP. It had also projected the need to raise that rate by an additional 2 cents in FY23 and again in 25, purely for capital infrastructure projects. About 58% of that original proposed 10-year CIP was for school capital projects. However, as everyone is likely aware, we did not increase taxes this year. That was based on, again, sort of numbers in April that 1 month into the pandemic. At that point, we had already done commercial and residential real estate property assessments, which is where the vast majority of our city revenues come from. Now that the pandemic has worn on and we're seeing those effects, we learned at our budget retreat last month that staff is projecting a $41 million shortfall for next year, FY22. Unlike the federal government, we do have to balance our budget, so that has to be resolved either by spending reductions, tax increases, or some combination of those two. We adopted our annual budget guidance for the city manager last month, and given the uncertainty, we basically asked for a variety of options, so sort of a bookends approach. A budget that resolves that gap without tax increases, so has an awful lot of reductions in it, a budget that resolves that gap without reductions, so all tax increases, and then a budget that includes a mix of those two options. So the city manager will present that budget on February 16th. I thought it would be good to provide some good financial news. So in October, S&P and Moody's both reaffirmed the city's AAA bond rating. This allows us to access the lowest possible borrowing costs, saving taxpayers millions of dollars. And we went through a municipal bond refunding, similar to a mortgage refinancing, to take advantage of lower interest rates. And so we got a net present value savings of $2.4 million for that exercise. The next thing I wanted to discuss is some items related to affordable housing. So for context, the average price of a one-bedroom rental is almost $2,000 a month in Alexandria, and you would need a gross income of nearly $77,000 a year to be able to afford that. By contrast, our minimum wage provides a gross income of about $15,000 a year. But again, thanks to our Democratic legislative majority and governor, our minimum wage is scheduled to start increasing next May through 2023, at which point it will be about $25,000 a year. For home ownership in the city, last year, the average assessed value of all residential properties was about $555,000. And for single family homes, that value averaged around $765,000. So as a top priority of council, the city has undertaken a number of initiatives related to affordable housing. Tomorrow night, we will consider an update to our affordable housing contribution policies and procedures for final passage and public hearing on Saturday. We are very limited by the Commonwealth and what we can ask of developers, and our housing contribution policies are required to be voluntary rather than mandatory. We would very much like the authority to make those mandatory. The policy update was requested by council, especially to address the growing number of applications not addressed under our current policy. So things like commercial to residential building conversions or senior housing projects involving independent living, assisted living, and memory care. So this update is coming out of a work group that started working last February and includes a variety of stakeholders. The city's Commission on Aging, the Housing Affordability Advisory Committee, and the Planning Commission have all approved these recommendations. And again, we'll be looking at that tomorrow and then having a public hearing on it on Saturday. Another item that will be coming to us in January related to affordable housing is our policy on accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, also called in-law apartments or granny flats. These are secondary independent living units that typically have a separate kitchen, sleeping area, and bathroom. And they can take different forms, whether it's a basement apartment, a converted garage, or an entirely new structure detached from a primary residence. They were originally identified in the city's housing master plan in 2013 as a strategy to allow intergenerational living, provide supportive housing for disabled adults, and support market-based housing creation. So ADUs can bring in rental income that helps cover housing costs for both first-time home buyers and longtime Alexandrians at risk of being priced out of the city. They can also provide on-site housing options for multi-generational families, caregivers for seniors and persons with disabilities, live-in child care providers, and other caretakers. They can also enhance housing affordability for the city's workforce, including recent graduates and younger professionals. Because they're smaller, they have fewer amenities than traditional rental housing options. That can increase their affordability as rental units. There are a number of presentations on the city's website, and based on feedback received during those meetings and surveys, staff released draft recommendations at the beginning of October and then final recommendations last week. So those staff recommendations include only allowing one ADU per lot, not allowing more than 3 persons to occupy an ADU. Both the ADU and the main house have to be owned together. They can't have different owners. There's also an owner occupancy requirement. So the property owner has to live in either the ADU or the main house. And I've heard from residents about both sides of this. I've heard concerns that this requirement could restrict flexibility in financing and might deter people from making the investment required to create an ADU. For example, if you had to relocate for your job and you had your ADU rented, you could not rent out your house. I've been told Seattle removed this requirement last July. But on the other hand, I've heard concern that without this requirement, ADUs could become a tool for developers and investors who'd own them rather than members of our community. So I know that's one thing we'll be having more conversation potentially about. Similarly, also heard about the requirement or the policy recommendation that would allow short-term rentals of the ADU, following the current city policies that allow short-term rentals. Again, as the policy currently stands, only with the owner living in the main house would that be allowed. Parking would not be required, but neither would it be allowable to remove any required parking spaces to accommodate the ADU. And then there's a variety of height, size, and setback limits that I don't think I really have time to go into. And we'll get that update from staff on Saturday as sort of an informational interview and informational presentation. And then both the Planning Commission and Council will vote in January on that. So if you have thoughts on any of those topics, please let me and my colleagues know. And finally, I just want to briefly mention at our last council meeting, I wrote my colleagues a memo suggesting that we look into allowing more options for the public to provide comment at our meetings. Prior to COVID, you could email us or you could come in person. Now, since we're meeting virtually during COVID, you can speak to us during council meetings through Zoom. And I'd like us to retain that remote public comment option when we return to in-person meetings after the current emergency. Potentially even before we're back to in-person meetings, I'd like us to accept comment via an audio or video file or by leaving a voicemail that can be replayed. And I'm interested in potentially translating such comments into English if necessary. So all of these options would obviously take additional resources. So staff is looking into it and we'll come back with more information in a couple of months. But I think it's really important, and I think my colleagues agree, to expand options and opportunities for public comment. On a similar note, and I'll try to keep this brief, I've been working really hard over the last year to advocate for changes to the state law regarding electronic participation. So during normal meetings, when there's a physical quorum, state law limits the ability of individual members of public bodies to twice per year, regardless of how many times the body meets. So this applies to all of our residents, including all of you who serve on our boards and commissions appointed by the city, who volunteer their time to make our community better. And I've heard a number of stories from people who've had to resign from boards and commissions, who've not applied because of this law, including residents who are military reservists, residents with jobs that either occasionally require them to travel or even work in DC and can't always get back in time for a 6 or a 7 p.m. meeting at City Hall. And this also affects residents, especially women who lack childcare or otherwise caring for family members. And I want to especially thank Councilwoman Jackson for amplifying that message. I could talk about this topic all night, but I think I am out of time. So if you'd like to know more, please contact me. And thank you again for the opportunity. And thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for providing an update from the city tonight. And please keep up the good work. Our next speaker, I would like to welcome back Delegate Jennifer Carroll Foy to the ADC. Some of you may remember Jennifer, who delivered an inspiring speech at our last Blue Alexandria dinner. Others of you may have worked with Jennifer on the effort for Virginia to become the 38th state to ratify the ERA. But Jennifer, she reached out over the summer when we were busy preparing for the November election, but I let her know that we would invite her back at the first opportunity to address our committee after the 2020 election. So I am glad that Jennifer's here with us tonight. Welcome.
Yes, hi everyone. Thank you for having me. I am Delegate Jennifer Carroll Foy, and I represent Prince William and Stafford, and I am running for governor here in Virginia. So never did I think that I would be announcing and launching my gubernatorial campaign in the midst of a global pandemic. But COVID-19 has exposed what was already beneath the surface, that too many Virginians can't earn a decent paycheck, afford their medical bills, or get ahead. And I intimately understand the challenges that Virginia families face because I live them. As a working mom with 2 jobs, my husband and I pay a second mortgage every month called childcare for our identical 3-year-old twin boys, while straddled with student loan debt. And many people have asked, well, Jen, when did your race and your journey for governor begin? And I like to remind people it didn't begin recently. It began a long time ago, growing up in Petersburg, Virginia. And for those of you who don't know, Petersburg has one of the highest child poverty rates of unaccredited schools. Right now, there's only 1 accredited school in the entire city, and was named one of the richest places to live per capita in Virginia. And that's where I'm from. But luckily, I was raised by my grandparents, and especially my grandmother, Mary Lee, a Southern Christian woman who raised me in the church, had me there 3 days a week, who taught me that the price I pay for my time here on earth is my service to others. So I don't remember a time we didn't have someone from the church or the community who fell on hard times living with us. So I'll never forget at a young age her having a stroke and becoming a quadriplegic, and having to sit at my dining room table with my aunt trying to decide if we're going to pay for our mortgage that month or for the medications keeping my grandmother alive. That's when my journey to become governor began, because it was in that moment that I realized that I was a part of a community that had been ignored, neglected, and left behind. And that justice didn't look like me going to a high school that had unlicensed teachers and books that we couldn't take home, but right across the bridge, they had the best of schools, the best of teachers, the best of technology. Justice didn't look like my grandmother, who was a healthcare worker, working at Central State Mental Health Hospital. But when she needed medications, we couldn't afford it. And I had to cut her prescription pills in half. Justice didn't look like my family members working 40 hours a week and bringing home $14,000 a year, which is still the same. So Virginia may be excelling and doing well for some, but definitely not for all. And when I travel the Commonwealth, I'm speaking to these individuals. When I'm in Portsmouth, Pulaski, or Petersburg, the story is still the same. That the wealthy and well-connected and powerful, they have so much representation in Richmond. But what about us? Who's going to give a voice to the voiceless? Who's going to stand up for the most vulnerable Virginians? Who's going to change the status quo and upend politics as usual? It's not going to happen by recycling the same old policies and politicians of the past. You get change by electing a new leader with fresh and bold ideas on exactly how to move Virginia forward. I have dedicated my entire life to public service. As a former public defender representing people 100% below the poverty line, people suffering from mental illness and substance abuse, and children where the criminal justice system, their families, their schools have all failed them. As a former foster mom, giving a home and mentorship to children who have been abused, neglected, and traumatized. And also as one of the first women to ever graduate from Virginia Military Institute. All of these things tell you that I know how to get things done. And as a delegate, I have a record of doing just that. Whether it is by changing the United States Constitution, by working with advocates to finally enshrine the Equal Rights Amendment for women's equality, where I know I stand on the shoulders of giants who've been fighting for this for generations. Or whether it is working in a bipartisan fashion to expand broadband to rural and Southwest Virginia, cleaning up toxic coal ash, leading the fight and chief co-patron a bill to make Virginia the first Southern state to have 100% zero carbon emission standard, fighting for LGBTQ plus protections and accommodations and employment, whether it's helping undocumented immigrants get licenses, or fighting to reform our cash bail system, which is work I'm still working on. And for years, I've been putting in the bill to legalize marijuana because it's the right thing to do. So whether it's criminal justice reform, women's rights, working families, I am proud to be here before you and say that I've passed the most substantive and robust package of bills for workers and labor in Virginia's history. But my work's not done. We still have some unfinished business. And that is why I'm running for governor. Because not only do I have a record of getting things done, but I'm fighting for the people for the right reasons. I will build a commonwealth where no one is left behind, making sure to bring diverse, high-paying job corner of the Commonwealth, to end the digital divide, to make sure that everyone has access to high-speed internet, and finally, fully funding education in a real way, paying teachers what they should have been getting paid, and improving our schools, because right now, our kids are going to schools with broken bathrooms and falling ceiling tiles. And all of those things have to change. And I will be the public education governor. But it starts here and it starts now. I am running because change can't wait. People are hurting and dying, and we need a leader who will fight for all of us, not just some. I have always put the people interest before corporate interest. I have never backed down from a fight. I've never taken no for an answer for fighting for all of you, and now is no different. So I go down to Richmond every day and stand up for all of you. And the question is, in 2021, will you stand with me? And I hope to continue to earn all of your support. So thank you all. And thank you for having me.
Thank you, Jennifer, for being here with us tonight. You have time for one question? I think I may ask the same to our next guest as well.
Well, I'm supposed to hop right off. I have another Zoom that I'm actually late for.
Okay, yeah, no worries.
Okay. But
well, I really appreciate you joining us, and yeah, best of luck to you on your campaign.
Thank you. See you.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. Tonight, I'm pleased to welcome our final speaker. It's a longtime friend, Delegate Sam Rasoul from Roanoke, who's running for lieutenant governor. As a relative newcomer into Virginia politics, Sam was one of those people who really welcomed me into the fold. And for those hearing from Sam for the first time, he is going into his 8th year as a member of the Virginia House of Delegates. He is an environmental champion and has a professional background in healthcare and has done a lot of global work, including in East Africa. Please welcome Delegate Sam Rasoul.
Well, good evening. It's most certainly a pleasure to be with you, Clarence. Thank you so much, Alexandria Democrats, for having me with you this evening. It's great to be able to share some thoughts with you for sure. I'll dive right on in, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have for as much time as you'll allow me. So first, congratulations on all the wonderful work as we delivered Virginia for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris by 10 points, which is fantastic. And we get to, turn to a new chapter in Virginia history. As Clarence had mentioned, I personally am going into my 8th year in the General Assembly. I've enjoyed it so much and I've learned a lot. But, for me, being elected in the western part of Virginia as a religious and ethnic minority, it was doing so through building broad coalitions. And so over time, we had to find and meet people where they're at and bring them into the fold because all of this is about relationships for sure. So as I was thinking about running for lieutenant governor, it broke down into kind of 2 big pieces as to why. Number one, on the policy front, many of you have probably seen, I've passed in a bipartisan way. Social and emotional curriculum now is going to be integrated into our K-12 education system as we move forward. This year we passed the Safe Drinking Water Act. But then on the advocacy side, pushing back against Dominion, who has been a very corrosive entity in Virginia politics for sure, advancing a Green New Deal that believes in intersectional justice in so many ways. And then, trying to do things like stop these large pipelines that I've been fighting for so many years that would double and even triple our footprint as a Commonwealth. But beyond the policy, which I have a strong passion for, is this philosophy. And as I was thinking about how to structure and convey that, it came back to my 3 family values that my wife and I raised our 3 children with. And that's always tell the truth, always be kind, and never give up. And so you'll see across our campaign, truth, love, and grit plastered all over the place. And that's in fact how our campaign is structured, where we are building a first of its kind crowdsourced platform of progressive ideas from across the Commonwealth, where we are not only asking voters for their votes and money, but connecting them with government services that they need, especially during these tough times during the pandemic, and trying to rebuild some of the trusted institutions that are so important for us as a party to be able to connect with them. And then through Virginia Grit, we are visiting safely every city and county in Virginia, wanting to gather stories and carry them with us all across Virginia. But the truly historic nature by which we are going to win this election is to become the first statewide candidate in Virginia history to be elected, funded 100% only by individual contributions. I believe that it's time to be able to turn a chapter and to be able to say that the people are looking for something better. It's time to elevate the type of politics that we have here in Virginia. And one important quote that really has guided me as I'm in my 4th term in the General Assembly. I've learned, it's not enough to be right. You've got to bring people along. And so there's a great Ruth Bader Ginsburg quote that goes, fight for the things you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. And so I hope that we can join each other as we're pushing for intersectional justice across the Commonwealth for sure. And with that, Clarence, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Well, thank you, Sam, for joining us tonight. One question I had is, what do you see as the major issues for voters in 2021?
You know, clearly for 2021, as we're going into a rough winter, COVID is going to be top of mind. You know, not only are we seeing the data worse than ever, my background being in healthcare administration, you know, trying to pay close attention to where we're at from a capacity perspective, but it's not even just capacity of beds, it's capacity of staff. What we're seeing is that this is a struggle in lots of different parts of the Commonwealth, but it's only going to be more than it's going to only become worse, unfortunately, as we are in the holiday season and as the winter comes upon us. And so thinking about how COVID impacts healthcare, it's clearly shuttering and hurting some small businesses, and then our workers are struggling. And then beyond that, one thing that we're seeing here in Roanoke is our education system is really struggling. With our students being out of school for so long, we're even seeing a rise in gang activity. We're seeing, unfortunately, when we're not able to engage some of these younger students, that they are just prime to be able to be picked up by lots of other different activities. And so when we think about the broad impacts to education, the broad impacts to our small businesses, and with regards to healthcare, COVID will be a top issue in the short term. In the long term, we see the environmental crisis continuing to be exacerbated. We were hoping that this past year we would, at least in Virginia, ban any new construction of fossil fuel infrastructure. To me, that had to be point number one in any environmental plan that we put forward. But I hope that in 2021, we will be pushing that. And then, of course, some good government initiatives where we want to be able to usher in some campaign finance reform, as that continues to cloud many of the issues that we want to make progress on.
I think we only have time for one other question, and it's this. You know, here in Virginia, we have elections every year, and on some instances, after successful presidential elections, we haven't done as well at the statewide level. How do you think we can overcome that, and what makes you the best candidate, you know, for lieutenant governor, so we can make sure that we can hold all the Democratic seats?
Well, this is a tough thing to discuss sometimes, especially when we're talking to liberal crowds, because the reality is that voting is not a logical decision. It's an emotional decision. And it's extremely frustrating because us liberals, we love facts and logic, and we want to talk about policy and dig down deep into things. But the reality is that issues actually very rarely impact elections. It's the emotion. And the way the neuroscience works, it's very, very clear that if we want to be able to hold on to this 10-point margin, which is pretty wide and pretty awesome, that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have delivered us here in Virginia, it has to come down to relationships. I mean, people have to stop thinking that we're only interacting with them as a commodity. And, you know, if you look back at the way unions were in their heyday, you know, we still have a lot of good, strong unions here, but boy, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, when the unions were strong and the middle class was strong, what did we see? Unions worked in solidarity, not just in the workplace, but your problem was my problem, and we were there for one another. And I think that this is critically important. And so when we think about what that means tactically, I mean, why not try to make sure that we're engaging voters and trying to connect them with the help and services that they need? Think about it like proactive constituent services. You know, very few voters, even in my own district, know what issues I vote on and what bills I carry, but they sure remember when I was able to help them with something. And, you know, my 7 years in public service, that's what people are paying attention to. So imagine if we were there, especially during this difficult time, Clarence. During this difficult time, we could step up and really show them, with the hundreds of millions and now billions of dollars that we spend on our elections, that a small fraction of that could be spent into campaigning a different way, using new age values and new technology, that we could, in fact, build some goodwill that is lasting, that will help us hold on to that nice margin that we have in Virginia. That's what we're going to be doing as part of my campaign. And I hope that we as a party will continue to evolve to invest in a different type of politics.
Great. Well, thank you, Sam, for spending some time this evening with us, and best of luck to you on your campaign in 2021.
Thank you so much for having me, Clarence, and thank you to Alexandria Democrats for having me this evening. Of course, we love to have your support, and feel free to check us out at sam4va.com.
Thank you, Sam. And I know that many of you on tonight were with us at the earlier business meeting, so we tried our best to keep tonight's live stream efficient. Congrats to all of the new members of our committee. As I mentioned earlier in my remarks, the year's not over. We have a great event on next Tuesday, December 15th, 7 to 8 o'clock. It's our annual ADC Leadership Circle event featuring Congresswoman Jennifer Wexton, and then we're going to have a special performance from the Hexagon Political Satire Group. We will be sending you more information and hope that you can join us for that. With that, thanks so much for joining us tonight, and hope you stay safe and socially distanced, and be well. Thanks so much.